Okay, welcome back, everybody, for episode 6 of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. I am the president of PDHC and one of your co-hosts, Jake Burdett, joined by my co-host, Hiruy Hadgu, our treasurer. How you doing today, Hiruy?
Hey Jake, hi everybody. Welcome back. We're happy to be here for episode 6. We have, I think, a very important topic to discuss. Jake, you wanna explain
Yeah,
some new developments?
uh, yeah, I can explain what we're here to talk about today. To wrap the year up a little bit, we'll be looking back at some things that happened in the past history this year and in the more recent history, but all with the common thread of we are going to be touching on the very serious topic of censorship in Howard County, suppression of all forms of, political rhetoric, opinion sharing. And we're not talking about like hateful opinions like, kill gay people or something like that, but we're just talking about just fairly basic criticisms of elected officials, which should be extremely tolerated in a society that claims to value free speech. So we've got a couple examples, both from some of the local political clubs, non-political Facebook groups that have censored political speech. Some traditional media not really covering things the way that they should be, as well as actual act from a county entity that just took place with the Office of Human Rights and Equity with our club in regards to a criticism we put up of State's Attorney Rich Gibson. So we're going to touch on that in a little bit, but I think we could start with some of the more softball, some of the not so serious, because when it comes to political Facebook groups or non-political Facebook groups, the principle of free speech still applies. Of we should be allowed to, make criticisms of elected officials, especially in, some of the Democratic club groups, for example. But when it comes to a county entity that, impinging on people's free speech, that's a really serious thing. But we'll start with some of the more low-hanging fruit. But before we get into any of the specific details, Hiruy, as maybe the most censored guy in Howard County, we can maybe touch on this with some of the examples. But when, in your opinion, when do people in power decide to, try to censor content, and why? Why do they choose which people to censor, which types of content to censor?
So, just to provide sort of a context for the audience, we're going to talk about this in more detail. But we came up with a formulation of we're calling it the 5 stages of confronting the establishment. So the 5 stages of interaction that an activist faces when confronting the political establishment in Howard County. And, I just want to provide sort of like the broader context, and then I'll focus on the censorship. But, the first stage, I think, is, just playing nice, everybody's, buddy, they're, it's very cordial, or, even more, very friendly. And I think the second one is if there's if the person becomes starts questioning things, then I think what happens is they start getting ignored. So that's this stage 2. I remember someone told me that in Howard County you're handled by being ignored, and so that's I think the second stage. I think censorship is the third stage of an interaction, and so we'll talk about this a little bit more in this episode. And the fourth stage is discrediting. So there's it's the act, the person, if they're discredited using other sort of made up stories, then they end up whatever they're sharing this particular topic could be could cast doubt on that topic.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think it's threats. So once the fifth stage, I think, is threats. Personally, I would say this. I have experienced this censorship over the past few years, especially when talking about developer influence. And this is not from the Republican Party or some other group. This is from the Democratic Party, from the Democratic establishment, where topics where the topic is development. I've been either asked not to talk about it, or any information that I share, whether it's on social media and different forums, have been removed, or I've been removed from those groups from sharing those things. And in fact, I mean, maybe you can also mention, Jake, when I recall that I recall you mentioned that there was a request that in the Columbia Democratic Club, while you were president, not to talk about development issues, residential development or whatever, like on versus relating to zoning and land use. Jake.
Yeah, and to answer my own question of what I asked earlier, why do people censor, or why do people get censored? And it's almost always because you are saying something that the people in power do not like. You're making them look bad. You're making things inconvenient for them, or even if with the Facebook group, for example, obviously it's not the elected officials running the Facebook group, but still the people running the Facebook group listen to them and can be pressured by them. So if you manage to make the elected officials' life hell enough, then they can reach out and put pressure on the foot soldiers to censor you on their behalf. And as you said, when I was Columbia Democratic Club president, I had requests from one member of my board specifically who's very entrenched in the local political establishment, and they straight up asked me, let's stay away from development issues with this club and with our meetings. And then they also asked, let's stay away from immigration issues, specifically ending our county's contract with ICE, which dignity not detention just got over the veto that Hogan did just got overridden today. So great news there. But I think the reason that they didn't want us talking about immigration or development, and of course they don't say this out loud, it's almost always under the auspices of just unity and civility and avoiding conflict. But really, it's the establishment that creates the conflict. One, for doing the bad things that need to be called out in the first place. And two, they could just ignore us when we make our criticisms, but they choose to go out of our way and try to shut it down. That was something that happens with development, and they try to act like, oh, we just don't want controversy. But really, in my eyes, what you should want in a leader is somebody who's going to do the right thing and stand for the right things no matter what. I feel like people try to say that that's what the Democratic Party should be. So it was interesting that when it actually comes to that, they just want to avoid the controversy, or at least that's the convenient excuse. But and there were a lot of different methods tried to use to censor. And the development is just one example. It's probably the biggest example because it's the most common issue that our county council votes on. But it's interesting that they would try to censor us from talking about the most important and most voted on issue. But when at first they just put the censorship sort of as an option, or as a suggestion, but really it wasn't a suggestion, because the second I tried to not take the suggestion and do it anyways, they did everything that they could to try to make sure that those meetings couldn't happen, disinviting guests, booking other guests last second who are going to have a very different opinion than the rest of the panel, that sort of thing. So, that's just one of my couple examples of censorship that I faced as Columbia Democratic Club president. And Hiruy, on the topic of, I guess, being silenced for making things inconvenient for people in power, you're putting out information that people don't want out there. I guess the biggest example that comes to my mind for you anyways, was when you published your expose on the Rouse Project. And, I'll let you speak on that, because I think you face censorship from a lot of different venues with that, which also showed it had an impact.
Yeah, I can tell you. So, just going back to the five stages, for a while, a lot of what I was putting out, especially by the establishment, it was I think for the most part ignored. So there was no acknowledgement that and I was told that that was the operative, that was the instruction, was to just ignore, because that would lead to bringing more attention. The reason that the Rouse Project could not be ignored was, first, it was in the context of the what was going on in the in the CDC, and I think the attempt to make you and other people on the board who are trying to do good things to make you guys look bad, I think backfired, and it brought a lot more attention to the Rouse Project. That's one reason. Another reason was there was a clear example of corruption by elected officials setting up, working with developer entities and setting up nonprofits to be able to accept county dollars, and that would ultimately be used to pay off their the people who are involved in these nonprofits, and more importantly, a way to be able to control deeds and certain development rights. So that would mean more money, a lot more money than that was initially contemplated. But I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars, because of the land rights, and so they couldn't ignore that, and that that led to I think a lot of the interaction that we have takes place on social media, and that led to me being removed from some of these groups. One major group is it's called the Howard County, Maryland group, which has at least, I think last I checked, it had like 16,000 members, and I was given a very I was given sort of an inconsistent reason, because there are rules on this page, and the rules that were posted on this page were being distorted to to enforce something that the group moderator, administrator did not like, and they didn't like that because it was attacking establishment members of the county that this member was tied to, and perhaps maybe considered them, good friends. So that happened, and I mean, lo and behold, this person, there was the perhaps upon reflection, the person realized that maybe what I was saying is true, because that person shared similar concerns about the Rouse project that I had, and shared it widely. And so, that was one, and then another one is the Ellicott City Democratic, club, that one day I was in the group, and then the next day I was not, and I asked the group administrator, and I was told that I quote unquote violated the rules 3 times, even though I was not aware that I had violated the rules the previous 2 times, because usually, what happens is you get, like if there's like some issues, you're informed.
You get a
So
warning.
yeah, I mean, these are like, I don't want to say they're Orwellian, but like they're, I think they're sort of Orwellian-ish, because they're using they're either creating rules out of thin air, or they're using the rules that they have to, for their own purposes, not an objective application of the rules, because that's what you would want, a good faith application of the rules, but just distorting it for their own benefit. And that was, I can think of those immediately, in terms of how that how the censorship applied to what I was working on.
And on that point, of how they just arbitrarily enforce these sort of vague rules, and you can just sort of make it fit to any situation that you want if the rule is vague enough. And for that reason, when I became Columbia Democratic Club president, we didn't have any sort of social media guidelines of what could and could not be posted, because I think they probably just went by common sense, and like, is somebody posting something racist, then delete it. Is somebody posting something ableist, then delete it. If they're just posting their opinion, then let it happen. And to me, that's kind of how it should be done. But and that is how it was done before I became president. And then once I became president, there started to be some more, quote unquote, controversial posts from people like Hiruy, but really it was just people saying truthful criticisms of elected Democrats that, in my opinion, needed to be said. And then all of a sudden there's this push from some of my, fellow executive board members of, hey, we need to create some social media guidelines here. And it's not to silence any critical posts of elected Democrats. Don't worry, Jake, that we would never even consider doing that. This is just to, like, if there's spam posts or something like that. And then also we'll put in a provision about, like, you got to be positive and you got to be friendly. And it's like, yeah, of course, people should be friendly and positive, but that exactly is the wording that can be exploited to mean anything. Because then if you ever make a criticism of any elected Democrat ever, that could be interpreted as you're not being friendly. But then, of course, if it's a criticism that the person who gets to enforce the rules agrees with, they're going to let it slide. So that's why I tend to be against censorship on principle, because it is such a slippery slope, and it might start in one thing, but it's always up to the beholder. It almost never gets fairly enforced, and it almost always gets enforced against those not in power, trying to speak up against those in power. That's what happened with the Columbia Democratic Club. That's what happened with the Howard County, Maryland group. That's what happened with the Ellicott City Dem Club group. Not just a Hiruy, but within the last week or so, I also found out that I was banned. And I found out because I had to proactively reach out to them and say, why can't I find this group? Because like Hiruy, I was never informed. They said, after I reached out and said, where's the group? They said, oh, you were banned because you you violated the policy 3 times. And just like Hiruy, well, I would have appreciated at least one single warning to say, hey, this post was against this rule, so don't make a post like this again, or you'll violate the rule again, just so you know. But I wasn't given, let alone 1 warning. You know, definitely not 3 warnings. So yeah, this is how it is arbitrary, vague standards that can be universally applied whenever and to whoever you like when it's convenient, and they're going to do it at the behest of the establishment. And that's why when people like those who originally criticized Hiruy for his Rouse Project blog because they were just going with the group think and not even applying any critical thinking skills and just jumped on the bandwagon against Hiruy. But then as a month went by and they started to think about it more independently, they published their own blog saying the same opinion as Hiruy in slightly different words, of course. And of course, those blogs were allowed to be posted the month before, and everybody's calling Hiruy a conspiracy theorist promoting disinformation. Suddenly, those people had nothing to say, and they just got real quiet all of a sudden. So, you know, it's also they try to, you know, paint certain truth tellers in the community. They literally want to silence you from speaking truth to power. And you know, it's social media. This is how the message gets out. This is why people say this arbitrary banning on Twitter and Facebook and whatnot is so controversial, because these things are essentially the public square now, and probably should be monitored like a public utility and had free speech.
You know, I think, you know, you touched on something very important there, which is, you know, groupthink. Howard County is very scary when it comes to how much groupthink there is on you know, a lot of public policy. People who disagree with the status quo are not going to say anything, because you know, going back to the 5 stages, they end up being ignored. So they don't want to be ignored, so they're not going to say anything. And you know, so if you end up, you know, bucking that groupthink and you start, you know, putting out some messages, you know, then that's how, you know, the way that to ensure that the groupthink continues is to, you know, to implement these censorship rules. I mean, these censorship actions. And the problem with this is, you know, so you know, I can tell you, you know, I don't think we should, you know, government entities should not be, you know, trusted. It's, you know, it's not our job to trust government entities. You know, we are, you know, we're supposed to question every, you know, all the actions that a government, you know, takes to make sure that, you know, they're on their toes, making sure that, you know, there's transparency at every stage. And so the part that's concerning to me is usually a lot of these people who engage in the censorship are the ones who end up taking, you know, responsibilities of, you know, the levers of power in government. And so, you know, that if they were just, you know, doing the censorship and then they're going home and they're not doing anything else, that's fine. But the problem is they either help shape the public opinion, you know, that leads to public policy, or they end up taking, you know, they end up being in charge of public policy. And you know, so maybe this is a segue into, you know, what we came across yesterday, and maybe you can help set that up, because this is really, you know, the this is really what it leads to, and this is what we need to avoid. And you know, it's really important that, you know, that people are aware of that.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. Of this isn't just people blocking or blocking people from groups for personal reasons or just for some small minor disagreement. Like, there is a grander political motive here, because they're acting at the behest to protect the image of people in power, and they don't want certain narratives getting out there, and they want the prevailing narratives to stay prevailing. They don't want some people in the community who have managed to convince a lot of people in the county that they're good, honorable people. They don't want that image that they've tricked so many people into believing to be damaged. And one great example, as Hiruy points out, and probably the most scary example of the county really trying to actually suppress free speech, even from a legal perspective, was Howard County State's Attorney Rich Gibson. It wasn't necessarily him trying to curtail the free speech, but it was free speech, essentially being intimidated a little bit to protect the image of Rich Gibson. And to give the background, so in case people are not familiar, and Progressive Democrats of Howard County did co-host a rally in front of the Howard County Circuit Courthouse last Wednesday, December 1st, almost a week ago today. And basically what that protest was about is Montgomery County and Howard County have agreements with each other where if either county has a police shooting, a fatal police shooting that kills somebody, the opposite county state's attorney will review the circumstances of the shooting and present their findings to a grand jury, who will then, I guess, make the determination whether it was a justified shooting or not. And I don't think there's a ton of police shootings in Howard County. Maybe there are, and I'm not familiar, but there does seem to be a decent amount of police shootings and killings in Montgomery County, where they have over 1 million people. And so that means Rich Gibson, our Howard County State's Attorney, has to review quite a few of these lethal police shootings. And, I was not familiar with this agreement between the counties until a couple weeks ago, but it came on my radar because ACLU, the Silver Spring Justice Coalition, Jews United for Justice, and a couple other organizations put together this rally last Wednesday in front of the Howard County Circuit Courthouse against Howard County State's Attorney Rich Gibson for basically, in their words, covering up police murders in Montgomery County and framing it to grand juries in a very misleading way to make it look like the officers were innocent. Specifically, there's a case with a young man named Kwamina Akron, who seemingly the police may have planted a gun on him. Even if he did have a gun and it wasn't planted there, they can't find any shell casings that the young man actually fired his gun. They can only find shell casings from the police, but that's just one example. There's another guy, Kwamina Akron's case was already ruled on by Rich Gibson, but the protesters wanted to reopen it. But there's another case still going on for a young man in Montgomery County that was killed by a police named Ryan LaRue. And there's actually, I want to say at least 6 mothers from the counties in Maryland that were at that rally speaking about, wanting justice for their sons because they never got it. And at least some of them, Rich Gibson played a big role. So that context is all to say that was last Wednesday. And then later on that day, we found out from one of our PDHC members, Kiana Folk, who's also a member of PFLAG, the local LGBT organization. And I guess it was Human Rights Day that day. And the Office of Human Rights and Equity had decided to put on a human rights panel and invite some people on. And Kiana, they're supposed to have somebody else from PFLAG originally, but they couldn't make it. So our club member, Kiana, ended up being able to go on the panel. And then from her being on the panel, we found out that Rich Gibson was also a panelist. Again, this is hours after he's being protested against for potentially covering up a police murder, and he's on a human rights panel, speaking like he, has an authoritative perspective on that. So as soon as we found this out, we thought that was a really big slap in the face to justice and to the families to put him on a panel for human rights when he's being protested for that same day. And so we put a picture that Kiana had sent us of, it had the panelists on there, and then it had a list of the questions that would be asked to the panelists at that hearing. And we, being angry that he was on that panel, we tweeted from our PDHC account, basically adding the Office of Human Rights and Equity, saying shame on you all for, putting this guy being protested against on the very same day for covering up a murder, putting him on a human rights panel that like hours after. How tone deaf can you be? you're using this office in a political way that it's not supposed to be. Here you were saying it's a campaign event, which is essentially what it was, and that's just unacceptable. That's not what these county entities are supposed to be used for. So we tweeted that, criticizing them, calling them out for it, making people aware, because probably many of those protesters were not aware. So, and we tagged some accounts, and it ended up getting a little bit of traction. You know, some other Friends of Latin America and some other organizations retweeted it, because a lot of people were justifiably upset at the Office of Human Rights and Equity. And so that was last Wednesday, and we thought that it was basically all said and done. But just yesterday, our club member Kiana, who again was the panelist, which is how we found out Rich Gibson was on it, and how we got the picture of the agenda for the panel, which I didn't even know was happening and would not have known without Kiana. But here, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, no, just a couple of just one clarification. I believe the panelists were the state's attorney, the county's health sort of director, and the PFLAG vice president. At least I'm looking at the picture here, and that's what it was. But maybe I'm mistaken. And then and you're right that this was essentially a campaign event that was organized by the Office of Human Rights and Equity, which is unfortunate.
And here's where sort of the scandal and the potential free speech violation comes up, is that, again, that panel happened last Wednesday. We tweeted it that day. Yesterday was Monday, so I guess 5 days had gone by, and I guess the Office of Human Rights and Equity had not seen the tweet up to that point, or maybe Rich Gibson hadn't seen that tweet, and then he found it and said something to them. But either we don't really know the behind the scenes mechanics of how it all played out. But all we do know is that all of a sudden, the Office of Human Rights and Equity is reaching out to Kiana and saying, "Hey, we saw that tweet that club that you're in put up about Rich Gibson and about the panel, and we would ask that you please delete the tweet because you had the picture of the agenda on there, and that wasn't supposed to be public information. So it would be really nice if you could take that down." And that is, the audience probably doesn't need me to tell them, but that is complete bullshit. That is not the real reason why the Office of Human Rights and Equity wanted us to delete the picture, because again, all it showed, and it didn't even show all of it because it was an incomplete picture. All it showed was who the panelists were going to be, or who the panelists were, and this was a panel that was recorded, posted publicly. So that's not a secret. And then the questions that were asked the panelists on said panel, which would also not at all be a secret because you were asking them publicly on video to be distributed. So it's obviously them grasping for straws. They know, we kind of have them red-handed here, because they know how bad it would sound to say, "Hey, delete that picture or delete that tweet because it criticizes Rich Gibson." They know that would sound horrible, so they can't say that. They have to instead defer to what Hiruy said, of sort of twisting the rules and applying these arbitrary standards that are clearly being made with some other purpose. So this is more serious. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say they're very good at using innocuous reasons to cover up for the main reason why they don't want to do something, or they don't want something to happen. And so that's one example is, oh, this was like prep material. It wasn't, it's not intended for public consumption, even though the questions were being asked publicly, and it's a public event being held by a county entity. This was this is how they decided to deal with it. But that's so I just wanted to comment on that, like this innocuous as innocuous reasons that that they come up with seeming.
Yeah, and this is a lot more serious than any of those like Facebook groups or clubs that we're talking about, because those are technically private entities. They can do whatever they want, or at least the way that we treat the social media outlets, they're private, so they can do whatever they want. So, I can disagree with them on principle, but they do technically have the legal right to do all of that stuff. But when it comes to a county entity, it's a completely different ball game. So that was pretty bold of them to even try that. And as soon as Kiana was telling us behind the scenes, and I didn't feel great leaving it up there, and putting Kiana in a tough position. But at the end of the day, we're not going to get bullied by the county entities to do this. And I think we kind of scared them straight, because they were just doing this behind the scenes with Kiana, and she brought it up to us behind the scenes. But as soon as she informed us of this, we did tweet and call them out for treading on very dangerous territory when it comes to, encroaching on an organization's free speech. And, Kiana gave them our email address so they can email us with the formal requests, but they have not sent any such formal requests. And I think it might be because they've realized that the optics are very much against them.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, I think Kiana did her part. She's made that request to the group, and so like you, I feel bad that that she's in a tough spot. But just to the point of why this is very serious is there are other incidences of these county entities covering up for terrible behavior. The Office of Human Rights and Equity was instrumental in slowing down the process of shutting down the detention center, the ICE contract, and actually perhaps even acting against it for a long time. The county, a lot of county Democrats were helped elect a racist sheriff, and given how reluctant the Office of Human Rights and Equity is to look at these things. I mean, the sheriff was he served the county for 10 years, so it makes sense now that there might be an unwillingness to act on these things. So and then like there are other committees and commissions, like the Spending Affordability Advisory Committee of where I was where I served for 1 year. And it's this tendency, this behavior to essentially shut down discussion, and shut down input, and prevent members from sharing their thoughts, and having a more a more deliberative, transparent process. So a lot of these people who engage in these censorship actions, on political club levels, or other levels, they end up either helping elect people in these commissions and committees and council members and county executives, or they end up filling those positions themselves. And so that's the problem, is it ultimately it leads to a point where it affects the broader public. And this is why I think we thought we bring this up in and provide put focus on this, especially on the heels of this attempt by the Office of Human Rights and Equity to to silence, basically to ask us to take down, questions that were asked. I think it's important that the public is aware, of what these behaviors behind the scenes, and pay attention, because usually it's not what it's not what it seems on the surface. There's there are some things going on that we as as the public may not be privy to, and this censorship is a big.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That not only is it important that these are public entities engaging in the free speech, potentially violating behavior, but also, yeah, that these are supposed to be objective, neutral entities that are just calling balls and strikes when it comes to human rights. But we've seen it become completely political, sort of just puppets to defend the interests of. And the problem is with how these things are appointed. If the county executive gets to appoint the Human Rights Commission, we shouldn't be all that surprised when the Human Rights Commission is, a puppet of the county executive or the establishment or whoever gets to appoint it. So good point there. And I think we're going to wrap up, this episode on the topic of censorship, but two other, real quick points that we want to make, and we won't really harp on them too much, is other ways, more subtle ways in which like censorship can play out, if you want to look at it that way, is not only basically by having no real mainstream media press cover any of these routine scandals that happen in the county in terms of pay-to-play corruption, and you couldn't pay a journalist to cover it for some reason, whether it's Baltimore Sun, Maryland Matters, both of which I'm fans of both of these outlets. I consume a ton of news from most of these outlets, but weird absence of any Howard County news. And when there is Howard County news, it's sometimes from the developers themselves, whether it's the Rouse Project people who get to go write up their whole big column, or developer attorney gets to write some op-eds in Maryland Matters, but they very rarely publish the countering narratives, which is actually more honest. And when we have the counter narratives, it's coming from a place of honesty, whereas the people pushing the developer narratives, they're doing it from a place of deceptiveness and trying to make money for themselves and their bosses. So both the media silence on these issues, as well as an example, Lisa Markovitz recently got an op-ed published, rare op-ed published, being critical of developers, but the way that for those who have never written in a public outlet before, you might be surprised to learn you actually do not get to choose your own titles for the most part for your articles. It's the editors that choose the titles, and they made the title in a way that made it seem like it was being critical of affordable housing. That was just totally not the case. So there's all these weird things, and then also just like the county not allowing certain people to testify at public hearings, which is another like actual potential violation of free speech principles or county laws. And we saw that with the Erickson case. We've touched on that, so I don't think we have to go any more into detail, other than maybe we can say one nice plug for Fred Tutman before we go, Hiruy, then we can close it out.
Yeah. So
I bring this up because he is somebody that the county has tried to censor when testifying. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, good point. So Fred Tutman, who was it's called he serves as a river keeper with the and it's an official statewide position that's charged with looking after the county's natural water resources, and he's got an extensive experience on this issue in terms of the impacts of man-made impacts of on our natural water resources. And he participated in the Erickson proceedings, and he was almost prevented from providing testimony. using procedural grounds, non-transparent procedural grounds. And lo and behold, after his testimony, he was essentially after serving on this commission, the Patuxent River Commission, for several years, many years, right after the coincident timing with the Erickson case, but maybe not, because the governor is it's no secret that he's got a lot of developer ties. I think even with the family business, which I think after his involvement with Erickson, he was his appointment was not renewed, and that that was not for someone who's doing a good job, seemingly doing a good job, no other complaints, to be removed, because I think he chose, he spoke his mind, he spoke truth to power, and he's not engaging in groupthink. He was removed. So we hope that the governor reconsiders, or the next governor reappoints him, because he's got an invaluable experience to the state.
Yeah, no, and you said it much better than I could, but Fred Tutman, good man, doesn't even live in Howard County, but he cares so much about the environment, about the rivers, that he, dedicated hours and hours of his time and expertise into trying to, help our community from a dangerous boondoggle that unfortunately looks like it probably is going to go ahead. But Fred, if you're listening, your efforts were not wasted. We do appreciate it. We know many people in the state appreciate it. I saw a lot of positive support in your comments when you announced that Hogan has retaliated against you, and take this as a badge of honor, that you're actually having an effect, and they saw you as a threat that they needed to remove. And listeners, feel free to write to the Potomac Riverkeeper Commission, or the Potomac River Commission. Feel free to write to Hogan.
River Commission.
Yeah, Patuxent River Commission. Because that great example of censorship right there, political retaliation for speaking the truth. And it's a interesting little cross section from our county to the state, and how a lot of Democrats are in the pockets of the same people as Larry Hogan and the Republicans, and all that. And they don't want you to know that, but that's what our podcast is here to shed some light on. So with no further ado, Hiruy, unless you have any last comments you want to make. No,
I don't. This was a very good conversation, I think, and hopefully it will lead to bringing more awareness to what's going on in the county in terms of silencing opposition, and just and the efforts to maintain groupthink.
Yeah, and let's hope this podcast episode does not get censored when we drop it. But so follow, as always, follow what Progressive Democrats Howard County is doing. Go to our website, hocoprogressives.com, sign up for our email list. We have a link tree now. Linktree, it's linktr.ee.com/hocoprogressives, I believe, and that will have all of our social media links. Become a member, $36 for dues. It'll last you, if you become one this month, it'll last you this month and all of next year. $50 for a +1 membership. We have Venmo. Find it all in the link tree. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll see you for episode 7.